Good morning. You're watching the Channel and Breakfast Show on Wednesday, the 6th of May. I'm Polly Winder.
And I'm Phil Trow, and in a few minutes we've got the latest news and sports headlines. But first, time to sit up and take note if you own a credit card. Here's our resident debt buster, Richard Fenton, with the latest. So during this credit crisis, what are the pitfalls of owning a credit card?
There's many pitfalls to owning a credit card these days. There's no new pitfalls, but there's certain things that we now need to be more aware of. One of the things is people quite often don't really understand what an APR is. People look at the deals and they go for a low number, which is always a good thing to do. But the APR actually stands for annual percentage rate. So, for example, let's use a mid-range APR of, say, 20%. Nice, easy figure. Every £1,000 you borrow on your card over a 12-month period, you will pay £200 worth of interest to your lender. And that interest can be compounded as well. So if it goes into the second, third year, etc., you're paying interest on the interest. So the £200 that you're now paying the lender, you're paying an extra £40 on top of that, and an extra £4 on top of that, and an extra 40 pence on top of that, and an extra 4p on top of that, and it goes on and on and on, which is why you have to be very careful with your payment restructure. Making the minimum payment is not a good idea at all. A nice example would be, let's be even nicer to the credit card companies and give them an APR of 17% instead of the 20%. They can be as high as 29%. That's something that's you've got to bear in mind. If you run your credit card up to £3,000 and you decide to make the minimum payment now, minimum payment is usually 2 to 3% or 5%, whichever the greater. If you elect to take that route for repayment, it will take you a grand total of 40 years and 7 months. You will pay a grand total in fees, £6,500, on top of the principal sum of £3,000, a grand total of £9,500. If you're of a similar age to me, still relatively young, but when you get to the end of that repayment plan, you're going to be well into retirement and knocking around the Derby and Joan Club with a huge credit card debt. Now, if you imagine if you multiply that by the UK average of 3.5 credit cards per individual, then that's a long time and a lot of cash and a huge responsibility.
OK. Do you know what? When I'm picking a credit card, I don't even look at numbers. I look at the design. I just got one recently and it's bright pink and I thought, wow, a pink credit card. And that's why I picked mine, which is wrong, isn't it?
Well, it's not exactly wrong, but there's a little trick with the design of credit cards. A lot of the major credit card issuers now, at the point of application, and this is crucial, will give you a list of designs from which you can choose how your credit card looks.
Yeah, I got a choice of colours and thought, yeah.
Part of that choice will have determined your credit rating, because there's some clever psychometric testing that sits behind each of the design of those cards. For example, if you were to choose the traditional provider's design, which is just essentially their logo, the Visa sign and the details, that means you're very clinical about your finances, so you're likely to get a higher credit scoring on that.
Really?
If you pick something that's nice, bright and pink, it may suggest that you enjoy a trip down to Oxford Street, Selfridges or into the Arndale every now and again.
It'd be right.
Now, that's not going to affect your credit rating, but it certainly gives them a psychological profile of how you will behave with your credit card and will determine how much credit you get on that card. Really? And we were talking earlier about even better advances where you can actually submit a photograph of your family, for example, and have that superimposed upon the credit card. But every single stage of the application, every decision that you make is being looked at and scrutinised by some very clever people who will determine what and how much you can have and for how long for.
So just to sum up very briefly, you'll have seen these big billboards which say, you know, we'll help you out of the credit crunch, sign up to our credit card. There's no nice thing as a good banker, is there?
Not really. You have to work the system to your advantage. If you've got a credit card, and credit cards are very useful, don't use them for everyday purchases such as food shopping, and do not make the minimum repayment. Use the minimum repayment as an emergency. If you're tight 1 month, then use the minimum repayment. But apart from that, pay as much as you possibly can and get the debt shrank.
Cheers, Richard.
Thank you very much. It's time now for all the latest news with James.
Good morning. Here's what's making the headlines so far this Wednesday. The new national ID cards will be tried out here in Greater Manchester before anywhere else. The area has been chosen to pilot them from this autumn as a voluntary trial. Members of the public will be able to apply for them to prove who they are rather than using passports or bank statements. Critics, though, say the area is being used as a guinea pig. The Home Secretary is spelling out further details of the plan this morning that will also mean high street stores helping collect fingerprints and photos for the new cards.
A city, an area, the opportunity to see the benefits of ID cards. That's a safe and secure and convenient way to prove your identity, and it's also being confident, if I've got an ID card, that somebody else isn't able to use my identity either to defraud me or to use it perhaps for carrying out serious crime or even terrorism. And we want to make sure that that's available nationally from 2012, but in the run-up to that, we thought, let's give an area the opportunity to really see the benefits for people voluntarily to be able to get an ID card. Manchester has got a lot of young people who benefit from an easy and secure way to prove their identity. It's already got a lot of people who've been issued for national ID cards because people are already carrying out ID cards out there. At Manchester Airport, we'll be issuing ID cards from this autumn. That's why we thought it made sense in the Greater Manchester area to give people the opportunity, voluntarily, to sign up for an ID card.
A lot of people have passports, driving licences. What are the advantages of this card?
Well, one of the interesting things about passports is that some of the biggest places we find lost passports is, for example, on the floor of nightclubs where young people need to prove their age. You know, instead of having an easy and convenient way to prove their identity, they take their passport out and then end up losing it. Other things that people find is that, you know, quite often to prove your identity now, to open a bank account or to get a flat, for example, you're carrying a whole load of information, utility bills, other personal information about yourself that actually perhaps you don't want to have to share with somebody else. An ID card has a minimum amount of information on it, but because it also includes your biometric, your fingerprints, your facial image on the chip, it's secure and it's a quick way of proving that you're who you say you are.
So Alex Ferguson's daughter-in-law and grandson are described as seriously ill in hospital after a road crash. Nadine Ferguson, who separated from the United manager's son Darren, was airlifted from the scene of the smash in Cheshire yesterday morning. Ambulances took the couple's son and daughter to a hospital in Crewe before the boy was moved to Alderhay Children's Hospital. The car they were travelling in crashed with another one in Macclesfield. Campaigners will have a final push this lunchtime to get support for the Christie to get back millions it's owed after the Icelandic banking collapse. Almost 100,000 people have now signed a petition calling for the £6.5 million to be handed back. A rally is being held to get extra signatures before the demand is handed in at Downing Street tomorrow. Soldiers at a barracks here in Manchester have been told their jobs could be under threat. The recession is being blamed for the possible cuts. With more on this, here's Kevin Duffy.
Territorial Army soldiers, or the TA, have served in countless major conflicts: Korea, the Balkans, Iraq and Afghanistan. But now they're fighting a battle on the home front after the government announced a review of the Territorial Army.
42 Squadron has been here since 1908. The implications of what was announced very quietly in Parliament last Tuesday, I believe it was, are that a number of territorial units are now going to be disbanded. As we've already said, they perform a very, very much needed backup to the regular forces.
And they run the same risks as full-time soldiers. That fact was highlighted recently in Afghanistan when a bullet slammed through the helmet of electrician and TA soldier Private Leon Wilson, missing his head by fractions of an inch.
I personally would say if it wasn't for the Territorial Army, the British Army could not meet its commitments.
At the Rusholme Barracks, 10 permanent and 70 part-time posts are at risk. The implications for the 42 North West Brigade were being spelled out last night by Regional Army Chief Brigadier Bill Aldridge.
Every unit will now have to put a case together for survival, I would suspect, and things like that will be taking place at a higher level than I actually have any information on at the moment.
In a statement, a Ministry of Defence spokesman said that no final decision had been taken over 42 North West Brigade, but efforts would be made to find new roles if any of the 80 people there were affected. Kevin Duffy for Channel M News.
Big changes to child protection services are due to be announced later. It's already been announced that some members of the public will be put on local panels in charge of young people's welfare. The government's had to draw up new guidelines after a report said improvements suggested 8 years ago after the death of Victoria Colombier weren't put into place. That's all from me for this morning. Don't forget the Channel M lunchtime news at 12 noon, and Andy Crane's here from 5 tonight with all the day's top stories. Now, though, the sport with Phil and Mike.
We'll talk Champions League in just a couple of moments' time. First, Mike's been looking through the morning's newspapers. 3 interesting stories. The first one concerns our old favourite, Joey Barton, disgraced at Newcastle over the weekend. He's been told he'll never play for the club again. Do you know off the top of your head who signed him for Newcastle? Was it Kevin Keegan? No, it was Sam Allardyce, who's now at Blackburn Rovers. And he's believed to be looking at bringing him to Blackburn Rovers, so that would be interesting. Isn't it? They've got a rocky dressing room already. Whether they need Joey Barton in it, I'm not too sure. Danny Welbeck, the young man at Man United, who's taking a lot of plaudits for his performances of late. I've been told this morning he buys his underwear from a budget clothing store, and he's very thrifty with his money. It's good to hear about a young man. One of his sponsors left £2,500 worth of boxer shorts in his locker as a gift, trying to get him to wear them. He wasn't impressed. He gave them to the reserve team players, so nice move from Danny. Can I just say I wear very, very cheap underwear, if anyone wants to drop any off. Danny, if you're listening, there's Phil. Yeah, exactly. And Emmanuel Adebayor, already disillusioned after last night's exit at the hands of United in the Champions League, has expressed a desire to leave, and he's told the club he regularly speaks to AC Milan Vice President Adriano Galliani. So it looks like Emmanuel Adebayor will be the first Arsenal player to jump ship before the end of the season, maybe, along with Arsene Wenger by the looks of it. There's nothing worse than a name dropper, is there? I know. You know. I'm always on the phone to him. Let's move on to last night's Champions League action. Yeah, quick look at the result from last night. An incredible performance from Manchester United. 3-1 they won down at the Emirates. They opened the scoring after 8 minutes through Ji-Sung Park. Ronaldo added a second on 11 minutes. The game was wrapped up just on the hour when Ronaldo added his second and United's third. Robin van Persie pulled one back from the spot with 76 minutes gone. The sad news there, Darren Fletcher was sent off for a foul and will miss the final in Rome. Just under 60,000 at the Emirates. It just goes to show a full house every week, and lots of money can't buy success. Yeah, exactly. So you can see highlights of that game, incidentally, on Channel M News a little bit later tonight at 5 o'clock on Channel M. Right, let's move to the Lancashire Cup Semi-Final. Yeah, that was the big one. I was in two minds last night whether to watch the Lancashire Cup Semi-Final between Blackburn Reserves and Bolton Reserves or United against Arsenal. I watched United against Arsenal, which is just as well, because our cameras were at the other game, and here are the brief highlights.
What can you make of it? Short. Maybe just looking to dick it over the goalkeeper, and he does superbly. Obadiah here, Campbell just telling him where he wants it. I'm going to go on his own here. He's still got it. Obadiah, brilliant solo goal. Swung in, glancing flick. Blackburn have their goal. Tracy goes for goal. Oh, and it's kept out just. And it is in the back of the net. From Marshall, the substitute. Here he comes. Bolton score, Bolton win it, and they will play Manchester United in the final. Blakeman, brilliant penalty. They've made hard work of it tonight.
Congratulations to Bolton. Now, not the weather you wouldn't have thought for cricket, but plenty of it today. LV County Championship Division 1, Day 1, Lancashire are in action, and the early team news from Worcestershire this morning. The home team are adding Ben Smith, Stephen Moore and Gareth Andrew to their squad. Alex Kervesi and Dave Wheeldon, the men, sadly to drop out. Lancashire welcome back Saj Mahmood, and they're otherwise unchanged from the team that drew over the weekend. Play underway, hopefully, at 11 o'clock this morning, although one look out of the window, I reckon they're going to be having a late lunch. Yeah, England also in action. England in action, the first N-Power test down at Lords today. Not much team news for the West Indies team. That will be announced at 10:30 this morning. For England, they're going to hand debuts to Tim Bresnan and Graham Onions, but pretty worrying statistic there. England have not won the first test of any series in their previous 14 attempts, so it looks like we'll probably be lucky to snatch a draw from the jaws of defeat once again. And one final piece of news, England have confirmed they're going to launch a bid for the 2015 Rugby World Cup. Old Trafford will be a likely venue, but I don't know what the RFU are playing at. They also want to play some games at the Millennium Stadium, which is the home of Welsh rugby. Why do we always shoot ourselves in the foot like that? Let's keep the Welsh out of it. Thank you.
Mike and I, incidentally, are known as the Glamour Boys of Channel M, but we have more glamour coming up after the break when we'll be talking to the reigning Miss Manchester. That's next.